Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to create your stamp design to be laser cut and engraved onto a rubber sheet. For the stamp assignment, we will be using Adobe Illustrator to do so. So go ahead and open up Adobe Illustrator. Now your program might look a little different than mine just because mine is probably a different year than yours. But you're going to find some equivalent of new file, create new, something like that. Go ahead and click on that. By default, your unit of measurements might be in points. We will want to go ahead and switch that over from points to inches. Now, the biggest this stamp can be is 1.5 inches. And so I would just make your document, your artboard, a little bit bigger than that. Maybe just like 2 by 2 and press this create button. Or you can press the enter key if you do not see the create button down there at the bottom. So once you have this, I would go ahead and start by making the outline of your stamp. Now, if you made your stamp handle, if you 3D modeled that, odds are you probably made it square, and so you might want to click on the rectangle tool over here on the toolbar and left click, and then you can choose the size of how big you want the square to be. So in this case, if you made your stamp handle 1.5 by 1.5, let's make your square also that size, and then we can move it around. Now, I will say this, if you did decide to make your stamp round, if you left click and hold on here, then you can make a ellipse tool, same deal, 1.5 by 1.5, and then you will have created a round stamp here. But we'll do a square for this example. Now, over here on the right-hand side, we have our properties. So currently our fill is white, our stroke is black. You can increase the size of your stroke, but I wouldn't mess with that too much because we're gonna actually change that to a very specific amount when we're done making our stamp. So as far as fill, I actually just recommend doing no fill, and then you don't have to worry so much about layers in terms of like what your design is inside here, okay? So I already showed you how to make shapes. Let's just make a star here just for this example. There are two select tools. There's the regular select tool, which is for selecting like the whole object, resizing the object, or rotating the object. That's what the main selection tool is for. But right underneath it is a solid white arrow. That is a direct selection tool. If you use that, you can double click on these anchors and manipulate just those points, which is very nice in terms of editing shapes. Okay, let's say you don't like any of the shapes that are offered here. You are able to make your own shapes. If you use this pen tool, you can create your own anchors to create your own little design, whatever you want it to be. If you wanted to make, like, let's say if I want to make this final point arced, if I left click and hold, then I'll get these handles that show up, and then I can choose a bend to make that curve right there. So after that, then you can also choose to make your fill black if you want. If you want to make it more like a silhouette kind of thing, you can make your design that way. Most of the graphic design artists will prefer to use a pen tool over a paintbrush tool, but you do have this available to you as well. Also, just increase the stroke size to increase the size of your brush tool, and then you can actually go in and paint. However, most of the projects that I see made with the brush tool don't look as clean, as professional as if you use the pen tool. If you wanted some variation, you can go to your brush here, and there's different kinds of like brush strokes that you can mess around with, you can play around with, do with that what you will. Okay, this is a good time to bring up that when you're laser engraving for the stamp, you probably want to just stick to black and white. You don't really want any gray shading like this. It's not going to show up that well on your rubber stamp, so I would go ahead and delete that. And what I just showed you is I used the selection tool to grab a drawing, and then I press the delete key. The eraser doesn't work like it would a regular tool, a regular eraser from like a regular graphic design, it works a little differently than that. And so if you're going to delete something, I would just use the selection tool or the direct selection tool to click on the object that you don't want and deleting it. It's going to make a lot more sense if you go through it that way. The text tool, pretty straightforward. You can create a text box. It's going to fill up with placeholder lorem ipsum. You can choose the font. So if you want it to be fancy, you can do something like that. You can increase the size. You can change how far apart the letters are. So you can edit it that way too. I would be careful for the stamp project not to have teeny tiny little lines like this, otherwise they may not show up on the actual stamp itself. So I would definitely, at least if you were using a font like this, I would try to make it as big as possible so that we're sure that it can show up. So that's a couple different tips and tricks that you can do. Let's just go ahead, and I'm just gonna create some stars here, and obviously I expect you to spend more time fine-tuning your stamp than just drawing things willy-nilly, but you know, you can do with that what you will. Okay, so I have my stamp, but I need to prepare this to actually be laser engraved and cut. Let me do a text too, just so I can show you how the text looks. So when I have this stamp here, if I was to laser engrave this, the text would be backwards. It would be mirrored, because the way that the laser engraver works, it's basically like holding a mirror up to this thing and cutting it and burning this image into a rubber sheet. Now, if you didn't have any text, I guess it wouldn't be that big of a deal if this wasn't mirrored. So to reflect this thing, I'm going to select everything, go to Object, move down to Transform, and then click on Reflect. So we'll want to reflect this vertically. That's great. And everything, it looks backwards now on Adobe Illustrator, but when we get this ready for a stamp, it will be the right direction when we actually dip it in ink and stamp it onto a piece of paper. Another thing that we need to do is we need to basically invert these colors, because how this works is wherever the laser engraver detects black, it will be turning on the laser. So it will be actually making divots into the rubber sheet wherever it's black. That means that if we were to dip this current design in ink and then stamp it, the white would show up, but the black parts would not. So I need to invert the colors. So to invert the colors, I'm going to go to Edit. I'm going to move down to Edit Colors and Invert Colors. Okay, now you may notice, well, where's all my pictures? We actually need to make the background of this block right here to be black so we can see everything. So I'm going to go to Fill, change that fill to black, and now we can see our stamp. It's been reflected, we've inverted the colors. The last thing we need to do is tell the laser cutter that we want to cut around this edge. So you need to make the stroke of the outline a very specific size in order for it to cut. So I would keep the fill to black, I would change the stroke to black as well, and then I would make the point size 0.001. That will tell the laser cutter that I want to cut around the edge. Anything that is 0.001, it is going to turn that laser on extra strength basically, and it will go ahead and cut around this image. So once you've prepared your stamp to be laser cut and engraved, you are ready to send this file to me. And anytime we are going to be laser engraving or cutting something, I would just save it as an Adobe Illustrator file. So go to Save As, save on your computer, save it as your first name, last name, stamp. And this is the file that you're going to turn in onto the Canvas assignment. Make sure that you're turning it into the stamp image and assembly file, not the stamp handle file. That is for your 3D model that you designed. The stamp image and assembly is for your design that you made on Adobe Illustrator. Okay, I will get to it as soon as I can and get this thing cut and engraved, and then you are good to glue basically the rubber sheet to the 3D printed stamp handle, and you should be good to test out your stamp. Good luck!